Let's be honest. Sonic the Hedgehog was made with two groups of people in mind, kids and grown men that have been playing the video game since the early 90s. I'm not ashamed to admit that as a 29-year-old man-child, I was genuinely interested in watching this movie, and I'm still a fan of the classic Sega Genesis games. Ever since this movie was announced and that now infamous trailer was released, I was interested. At first, I thought this movie would be a complete cluster, but when the original character design was reworked, I was more interested because even if things were horrible from the start, it let me know that the makers of this movie were interested in making things right and attempting to deliver a final product that would please the fans. As a child of the 90s, I know just how many horrible video game movies are out there. Thankfully, this movie isn't one of them, and it leaves me hopeful for the future. Sonic the Hedgehog really doesn't follow the plot of any of the games, but that's perfectly fine. The classic Sega Genesis games really didn't have a standout story, and Hollywood does have to make things that are accessible to almost everyone, so it's understandable that the movie turned out how it did. This movie isn't a masterpiece, and I wouldn't say it's the greatest movie based on a video game, but I found it enjoyable, and that's really all I could ask for. In particular, this movie was more emotional than I expected it to be. It's not Life is Beautiful, but during my viewing of it, the movie had just started and I was already feeling bad for Sonic. It's not just mindless dribble. It showcases how lonely he is and how that has affected him. I realize many will think it's silly to feel sad while watching a movie based on a video game character, but if Castaway can manage to do that with a volleyball, then I guess just about any other movie can do the same, and it's all the matter of how things are executed. Another thing that surprised me was Jim Carrey's performance in this role. I've been a fan of Jim Carrey since the 90s, and I'm a big fan of the Ace Ventura movies along with Dumb and Dumber. I recognize that Jim Carrey is a talented actor, but I also know he's capable of portraying characters that are really out there, and at times it leaves you wondering if this really is a talented actor or a madman that just happens to be getting filmed. Don't get me wrong, he partially comes off that way in this movie, but his portrayal of Dr. Robotnik is much tamer than I initially expected. I don't know why, but I expected Jim Carrey to do a voice for Robotnik. He acts in an eccentric manner, and you can tell that this character is different than other characters in this movie, but this wasn't Jim Carrey's most out there performance. That still belongs to the Cable Guy. On the topic of the performances, everyone did a good job. None of these actors are going to be winning Oscars, but their performances fit right into what this movie sets out to do. In general, this movie belongs to Jim Carrey and Ben Schwartz, the voice actor for Sonic. It's really not surprising, seeing as how he's entertaining in his role as John Ralphio from Parks and Recreation, but he really does a good job here as a voice actor. He's very expressive, funny, and perfectly captures the hyperactivity/overexcitement of a young teenager. Seeing as how this movie is based on a video game, you'd expect there to be references tossed in all throughout it, but I was surprised to see that they weren't shoehorned in. At times it was noticeable what they were trying to convey in certain scenes and it came off as a bit cheesy, but it was also perfect how they included elements from the games. Specifically, it was in a scene where Sonic and James Marsden's character were being chased by Dr. Robotnik. At one point, Sonic does a charged roll into a tank and the usage of special effects made it look spectacular. It left me thinking, the makers of this movie could have just done what most awful video game movies do and haphazardly throw in a line that references the video game, but it wasn't that way, and it left me thinking that a decent level of thought went into the movie's writing. Sonic the Hedgehog isn't a cinematic masterpiece, but as I've said, it does a good job for the type of movie that it is. Being that it's aimed at children and fans of a video game, most would assume that automatically means it's garbage, but it's not. I've already discussed how I enjoyed the performances, but this is also a movie that looks good. Some of the scenes which depict video game-based settings can look a bit too digital, but it's done in such a way that things just fit. If it's between the finished product and the Sonic that was showcased during the initial trailers, I'll gladly take what's given. This is also seen in how Sonic's speed is handled. There are different ways in which Sonic's speed is showcased, but I really enjoyed the scenes where it seems as if everything's moving at a slow speed and he's moving at a regular speed. From his point of view, he's the one moving incredibly fast. I like these scenes, but there's one in particular that left me thinking it was a bit too much like the Quicksilver scenes that have been done in past X-Men movies. It looks cool, but at this point it's not as impactful or as amusing as they'd like for it to be. It seems as if every movie that has a character with super speed in it has a scene like this. I would have preferred for there to have been more of the scenes that appealed to me, but I guess this was done with those past movies in mind. It's possible that I've given this movie more praise than it deserves, but what can I say? I enjoyed watching it. You don't need to be a fan of the video games, and I like to think that this is the kind of movie that can be enjoyed by everyone in the family, but you'll for sure get more out of it if you have a strong connection to the video games. I don't think it's the greatest video game-based movie, but it was entertaining and I liked it. If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much for watching.